He was kind of confused, like, wait, you don't need to know anything about the VIN number or any other information. I said, no, I know exactly which car that is. Where is it? Where did you find it? There's a number, about 13 cars is kind of the general accepted number regarding US built hammers. We hear global production is somewhere in the 30s. AMG doesn't really have great records and there's not a lot to kind of chase down, but when there's 13 cars, you can pretty much keep track of where most of them are. This is before the days of, technology such as VinBookie, where you can actually attract and keep track of these things. It was mostly relying on forums and dedicated enthusiasts like myself and many others in the community. And most of the cars were pretty much known about. There was only a few missing cars. There was a registry on an old forum, but you had one car that popped up one time on Reddit as just rolled into the garage was a navy blue Hammer sedan. That was kind of one of the missing cars. And there was always this lost Hammer Coupe that popped up. And it popped up one time on a Peach Parts forum post, and it was interesting. It was a Hammer Coupe with a 6-liter 4-cam in it, and then it always had a broken fan shroud in it. And you'll see a picture of a guy kind of standing outside with these chrome wheels and these black center caps that were aftermarket, but maybe they put them on. The guy liked them, so they put them on. They were the cars were built however you wanted. The car was never really known where its whereabouts were, and some people thought it was in California, but nobody really had any firm information. I ended up calling a shop that did a motor build on a 117 Mercedes engine, and I just ended up talking with him, and I was like, oh yeah, this and that, like, you ever work on any of the 4-cams? And he said, oh yeah, I worked on a Hammer. And I'm like, no, you didn't. There's like 13 of these cars. So I thought he misspoke and talked about an SEC with the 4-cam engine, an S-Class, not the E-Class. And he's like, yeah, I worked on one. Let me send you some pictures. And lo and behold, it's this red car that nobody had seen any pictures of, had the engine taken out of it and fully gone through. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen these photos before, and the community hasn't really seen this. So it was definitely an interesting discovery to see, wow, this car is out there somewhere. So, and that was probably 2018-ish was the last and those were old photos, like '08, I think it was the date stamp on the old digital camera pictures. Then all of a sudden, kind of time goes by, and I wished a broker buddy of mine named Max a happy birthday, and then a couple days later, I get a random text from a picture of an interior from an E-Class with the original Mercedes audio demo cassette, and it said 300E 24 valve. I'm like, oh, a Sportline 300E. It's kind of cool. Then another text comes through, and I see this car in this garage. It's kind of faded red paint with the hood's open, and I can see the silver Mercedes-Benz airbox from the 117 in the E-Class, which never had the V8. So I was like, oh my God, that with the updated cladding, the chrome wheels, and the black center caps, there can only be with the red on tan, and it's a coupe. I said, this is the Lost Red Coupe. So without hesitation, I sent him a text saying, what's your wiring instructions? And he was kind of confused, like, wait, you don't need to know anything about the VIN number or any other information. I said, no, I know exactly which car that is. Where is it? Where did you find it? And started blowing the guy up to try to figure out any information. He's like, hang on, let's slow down here. It turns out the car was acquired by a woman in a divorce that was behind her house as a rental property. And it was an old car that never ran. So she didn't do anything with it and just wanted to get it out of the house and just get some money for it. Ended up making a deal with them and kind of going back and forth. And this is all the span of like 4 or 5 hours on a December 2020. They ended up getting in the car, driving to St. George, Utah in a snowstorm to load this car up the same day, to then wired her money and then took care of it. Then it really cool story was ended up taking it back to Luxe Auto Spa in Salt Lake, where I called my best friend from high school who was an elite level detailer that worked for Adams Polishes and then worked for Barrett Jackson, did the show team and did a bunch of stuff in the detailing world. And I flew to Denver and we actually road tripped all of his whole unit, his whole Suburban, packed up with all of his detailing kit and arsenal, if you will. We drove to Utah, then ended up going to Luxe Automotive, and they opened the doors up for us, where it was seeing this car completely covered in barn dust and faded paint. It was just really cool to see that there's this hidden car in the community that nobody knew about is now in a barn. Now it's sitting here, and we're going to go through and did the whole cosmetic restoration process. So we went through and documented everything of washing the car for the first time very carefully, and then put the car up on jack stands, took the wheels off, suspension detailed. And so we start washing the car, and it has so much oxidation from sitting outside that the actual soap, we have a picture with the soap, is turning red from the oxidation. So go through it, and then ended up polishing the car, and the car came out spectacular. It was really faded and red and just covered in dust, and it was a cool project to be involved in, working with somebody who had an elite understanding of paint corrections. Like, anybody with a wool pad and a rotary can go destroy a paint job, but actually looking at this from a preservation standpoint is, how do we bring this car back without taking too much paint off the car? And the best part about it was the car came out phenomenal. There was one little issue where we had some paint on the hood, but that was able to get taken off very, very, very carefully, like house paint or something like that got on it. But ended up 2 to 3 days, steam cleaned everything, and all the interior wood came out, and the car came out looking like a 6,600 mile car. Because the car had been sitting for so long, it needs certain things like the fuel system, and all needs to be gone through, is all dried up. But that's just standard Mercedes stuff that you don't have to worry about with the vintage speed stuff. Going back on the Hammer Coupe, it was actually purchased by a gentleman named Gary Prim. He was the founder of Prim, Nevada. Like, a guy owned a town. And what's interesting is, in one article, he compared his 934 Porsche boring in comparison to his Hammer Coupe, which was interesting. Every car he owned was red on tan. So it was interesting to note on that car that it had some interesting ownership. And then it went to Las Vegas, and it was in a trade deal for some audiovisual kind of gear, kind of a trade deal, if you will. So then it went to the wife in divorce. So that was the history on that car. I think my involvement with AMG is kind of just the classic story of just staying with it and just following your passion, if you will. So it all started with, my father said you can have any car you want as long as it's in the 80s S-Class, because he wanted something that was reliable and safe, which it definitely is. I mean, it's like bank vault build quality, but it was just following the rabbit hole and the intuition of these cars are special, and then following what you love, of just kind of following the history, and then the people that were involved, and what these cars did, and how they took on the world's supercars, and they were faster and more expensive than a Lamborghini Countach, and that was the record-setting car that broke everything. And then now a four-door super sedan kind of took over and dominated the world. So then these cars kind of disappeared and went into these second or third owners. But in terms of just kind of telling their story, like, that's what's really intriguing to me. So my plan right now is to use the car to tell the story of AMG, and kind of use it as a reference for other cars to be restored, as kind of the one to be judged against. Not really intending on selling it because of how special the car is. It's going to be used and shown, and hopefully shown with the community, but it's just a unique piece that was able to acquire at the right time and just showcase and share with the world.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease, with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars, because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VinWiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.